welcome to Alter Your Algorithm, a podcast where we talk about what we focus on and how we can make sure it's Jesus. My name is Jackson.
I'm Tyler.
Thank you for joining us this week. We're excited about this week because we've got a fun guest to join us. I would say a staple in the Hopkinsville community. I was talking to somebody before we recorded today, and they were asking, who you got next? And I was like, we got Hunter Ezell. He's like one of the famous people in Hopkinsville.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Yeah, but I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about today. Of course, I'm excited to hear Hunter's story a little bit, and then of course give you guys some practical things you can take away as you walk in your spiritual life. Life rarely follows a script, and neither does faith. The way we end up where we are is often very unexpected. We talked to Cheney a couple weeks ago about that, but today we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. The framing question is, what if the chaos you're facing isn't something to run from, but the very space God is using to create something new?
Yeah, looking forward to having Hunter on today. We should have hit record a long time ago, so it's going to be a fun episode, but also looking forward to kind of hearing a lot from Hunter. So, Hunter, I want you to start with telling us a little bit about yourself.
What's up? My name's Hunter. I'm 28. I never learned how to read. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, dude. I like to consider that in another life I was a comedian, but in this life I'm a wedding filmmaker. I'm a drummer. I tell people all the time that I do pretty much everything. I have my reverend's license. I worked at Starbucks for 5 years. I was homeschooled. I do this, that, and the other. But I can't cook, so that's about all I can do there. But yeah, dude, I grew up in Hopkinsville my whole life. We lived out on Butler Road, and I don't consider myself a country bumpkin whatsoever, but I was always involved in church. We grew up going to Bridge of Hope Fellowship, downtown Hopkinsville, and right next to Farrell's. I was playing drums there when I was like 10 years old. And then the solar eclipse rolled around, and next thing you know, I'm making a video about Hopkinsville, Kentucky with an iPhone. It goes absolutely berserk at what I thought at the time was viral. Was only like 150,000 views. That's still pretty good.
Yeah.
These days numbers and stuff. And I remember at church though, they announced it. They were like, "Hey, big congratulations to Hunter. He went viral on Facebook." It was crazy. We had like a group of like 150 people in our congregation. They're just like, this week's announcements. We got men's meetings. Then we got Hunter went viral. Yeah, I'm just sitting there in the drum cage like, yep. It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
But we filmed weddings all over the world. My wife and I. Logan's mom was my fourth grade teacher. She was fourth grade was the last full year that I had before I was homeschooled. And then after that, I pretty much was switched on Schoolhouse, cheating on my homework every day.
Some things never change.
Never change, baby. They got AI now, though.
It's a different animal being in the school system with AI and high schoolers. Some of them use it as a tool.
Yeah,
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they do, but
just find it out on your own. Don't give them this stuff on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, Hunter's a pretty boring person.
Yeah.
So.
He didn't even tell you about the Legos that he
right,
was.
Yeah.
My hands are rough right now because I'm building a 1,600 piece Lego set. My mom's like, "Hunter, how do you have time?" I said, "The Lord will make a way."
That's what we should have titled this episode.
But we started the podcast in May as if I don't have enough things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it all started because, if you guys can't tell, my favorite thing that I love to do is talk. I like to talk with people about who they are and what they do, people that inspire me. I have this long list of people that I want on the podcast, and I'm slowly knocking it off, know. But it's just like people that inspire me, people that have incredible stories to tell. Somebody's going to be like, "Hunter, Bird Dog inspires you?" I was like, "You've never heard of marketing."
Yeah. Well, and the podcast you're talking about is your own podcast that you and Logan produce called Creative Chaos. And it really is a creative experience. If you're listening and you want to be entertained, I would say more than anything, but also get to see those conversations with with people, check out Creative Chaos. I'm sure you could pretty much get it anywhere.
Yeah, you can get it on YouTube and Spotify. Apple Podcasts hates me for some reason. I'm not gonna upload just audio. That's, I'm a videographer.
Yeah.
I got a whole intricate setup and stuff. But it's been one of those things that I'm just blown away at how big it's gotten.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that kind of caught our eye, just, the video side of it. And so who would you say is probably, I won't say your favorite guest, because that's not but they ask us that all the time. It's like, oh, like all of them, you know. But what, I guess, who was probably the most interesting so far?
So the most interesting one so far, I got two. The first time I ever met Tammy Slayton was incredible, because I'm the type of person where, we live in a part of the country now where if you see a famous person out in public, you're going to absolutely trip up anybody that's, quote unquote, made it. Look at that person, I met Tammy. I set that up because she was friends with somebody who wanted her to come do a fireworks commercial in Hanson, Kentucky.
Okay.
And they were like, Hunter, you want to do the video for it? I said, sure thing, I'll come do it. So I pull up. Tammy's just there hanging out. I'm like, what's up, dude? I dap everybody up. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, old or young, I'm dapping you up. I was like, what's up, Tammy? She goes, hey. Just like, that's cool. And then just getting to sit down, and I think my whole point, like, it got to a point where I realized that the whole point of my podcast was I wanted to pull the curtain back, because I feel like a lot of people, they see stuff on the internet. They see people, like, I would never post about the drama I have going on in my life. I would never, all you see are the positive things that I've got going on in my life. But I want people to come on this podcast, and I want them to feel comfortable with me talking about them, what makes them human.
Right.
I feel like sometimes we get lost in the quote unquote proverbial sauce of like where like how people just, the internet's the greatest hits of your life. And I wanted to get people on and be like, hey, this person, like the amount of people that got on which I still get them every day. Tammy has almost 1 million followers on Instagram.
Wow.
And every day people are like, wow, fix your teeth. Wow, that. I'm like, you're telling that to a real person.
Right.
It's like people say that she looks like this, that, and the other. People call her a Sims character. I was like, bro, that is a real person. And she's genuinely been my favorite. Me and her still talk. I text her all the time. I was like, hey, how are you doing this week? She's like, I'm great. Thank you for asking. And just that. I still love talking to Tammy, but we have another episode coming out. So if this gets posted on Monday, we'll have my next guest that I'm very excited about coming out the day after this. He is a 12-year-old worship drummer from Clermont, Florida, and he is. I see so much of myself in him. It's almost like terrifying, because like I thought I was fantastic at the drums whenever I was his age. But holy guacamole, this kid is an absolute unit.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to his Instagram. He's got like almost 1 million followers on Instagram. I just reached out. That's my favorite thing. I just airball to people. I was like, hey, you want to come on the podcast? You never know what's going to happen,
right.
And they responded like, yeah. And like, we made a whole trip out of it. Me and Logan, we're annual pass holders at Disney World. We're like, let's just go down there and let's record with this guy. We found a spot on Peerspace. They already had the cameras, the audio, everything like that. We just went in there, and I literally chopped it up with a 12-year-old for an hour and a half. And I left so inspired, I feel like I could run a marathon.
Yeah, that's awesome. My favorite things about having guests on the podcast is we had Chris Bensel on, which is a guest that you've had on, and in the episode, and you said it, he was humanized. A lot of times there are people that we see out in public or on social media, and because they are in a position of authority or whatever, sometimes we kind of hold them in this high regard and we say stuff about them, or like we know that other people have opinions about them, so we're afraid to say what we're
right.
think. But whenever you have conversations with people, 9 times out of 10, you leave that conversation, I do anyways, feeling better than when I started that conversation. There's assurance that comes from a conversation that you can have. And then whenever you talk to young people who have talent that they're using for the Lord, it can be inspiring as well.
Dude, it's insane. Just the way that he was able to just tell me things that I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I learned, because me and my wife, we currently attend New Work Fellowship here in Hopkinsville, and I'm also the drummer, one of the many drummers that they have over there. And, we were able to relate on so much. And I was like, and I looked at his daddy, and, I look at life, and I'm sure I'll reference this plenty more times, but I've climbed, quote unquote, many mountains in my life, and I looked at his daddy and I said, look, man, y'all about to climb Mount Everest with this kid. Like, y'all just getting started. This kid's got a stick deal with one of the biggest stick brands in the world at 12 years old.
That's pretty awesome.
I'm like, brother, why didn't they have the internet when I was a kid?
Right.
Like, why didn't they have TikTok when I was a kid?
So you've built Ezell Film Company. Would you say it started in 2017 when the eclipse?
Started in 2017. I had a girl that was like, she sent me my own video, and she was like, can you make a wedding film like this? I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't know what to quote her. I just threw a random price, and she was like, all right, bet, meet me at Starbucks. And I was like, all right. So I looked up cheap, contracts on the internet. You know, you're just making it up as you go when you're just getting started. And I met this girl, and I used dubstep over my first wedding film ever.
Nice.
She loved it. I showed them in the Panera parking lot. And then with the money that I made from that and another gig that I had here in Hopkinsville, I bought my first camera.
Wow.
And it was a Lumix G7. And still the low light on that thing is better than any other camera that I could possibly get these days. But after that, people just kept coming in.
Yeah.
Word of mouth, stuff like that. And then I started making connections with bigger names in the industry. Mm-hmm. And just, it's crazy. We filmed in 21 different states over the past 5 years.
That's wild. That's wild.
Well, just nuts.
If you're from Hopkinsville and you're on Facebook, there's a pretty good chance that you've seen some of Hunter's work. I mean, it really is good. What would you say you enjoy the most about telling people's stories?
I really enjoy, a lot of people, whenever they inquire with us on the internet, one of the things that we put on our inquiry form whenever you're filling out, you want us to like film your wedding or potentially film your wedding, it was like, which film did you like the most? And people said, they always reference one of these films. And the film in particular, they were like, I really feel like I am living in that wedding day. I want to encapsulate what I hope is the best day of your life. I want you to be able to take a step back into it through your film and everything like that. And I think it's really cool that everybody's story is different. I get people that are like, I want my film to look just like that. I was like, well, is that your wedding day?
Right.
I can't do that. There was a lot of times we get people that ask us, well, how long is the film going to be? I was like, I don't know. I haven't been to your wedding yet.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we don't know how long the episodes are going to go. Sometimes we're shooting for 25 minutes and we'll talk for 40. But part of that is the creativity of figuring out how all the pieces go together. And that's a fun problem to solve sometimes.
Oh, 100%.
Creativity and chaos often go hand in hand. How have you seen God show up in the middle of messiness?
Dude, so it's like most times in my life, the problems that I thought I had were, there's a greater outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's like the missed flight theory or something like that. I see these people on the internet all the time talking about how, like, you've been diverted for a reason. Mm-hmm. Certain things didn't happen. I believe that if I didn't do this one thing, I wouldn't have got this one gig, and it's like, I'm a constant believer in the fact that the smallest things can have the biggest impacts. Like I think about, like if you take, the way me and my wife met,
mm-hmm.
for an example, it's just the smallest inkling of how we met. But essentially, she posted a song by the Chainsmokers on her Instagram story. They collabed with 5 Seconds of Summer, one of her favorite bands of all time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that song. And I think about the fact that if they never released that song, she never would have put it on her Instagram story, and I never would have taken the time to message her. Therefore, who knows if I would even have a wife.
Right. And you even the video, you just pulled out your phone.
Yeah.
And like that's how you started.
That's literally how I started. So it's like, if you ever, it's like the kid out there that wants to make something of himself and he hasn't found it yet. It's like oh my God, I'm about to quote a Disney ride. One little spark. Right. Figment, it only takes one spark to like let your imagination go. It only takes one rock to roll down the hill to start an avalanche. Right. I mean, it just.
Well, that's a song. I don't know the last time we sang it, but it only takes a spark to get a fire going. Like, it's a song we would sing when we were kids. It does only take a little thing to make something big. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." It's like we can plan. We've talked about this. We can plan. If I told you in 2017, Hunter, that you would be going to Disney World last week to film a podcast with a prodigy drummer, would you have believed me? It's just cool how we end up in places where we don't expect. You knew that you had a passion for filmmaking and telling people stories. Now here you are getting to do that to a degree that is, I would have never had dreams that big, but now you're getting to do that, and it's awesome.
I wake up every morning not knowing what I'm going to see on my phone. I don't know who's going to inquire, just the opportunities that we've been given. I know it's nothing but God at the end of the day, because, I think, my mom always told me, especially with drumming as a kid, she was like, if you don't use it in the right way, you'll get it taken away from you. God will take it away from you. And I thought that meant I'm going to wake up one day and I'm magically not going to be musically talented anymore, But what she meant by that is like, what I think the bigger meaning behind that is that if you don't use your talents in the right way for the right reasons, you will lose those opportunities to use those reasons.
100%. I mean, I mentioned this parable very recently, I think, but the parable of the workers who, some of them used their talents, and then there's one guy who didn't. And when the master came back, he took the talent away. Literally his well-being, his way to make a living, he took it away. That's scary, but it also goes to show us, like, hey, use what God's given you to glorify him. Weddings are full of emotion. They're full of meaning. What life lessons would you say you've learned from behind the camera being at all these weddings?
I feel like a lot of times we get stuck on small problems, and we make those small problems like our whole life. And I think you look at, like I want to say I counted a couple days ago, we're inching up on 400, 500 weddings, that I've filmed in my entire life. That's a lot of cake. That's a lot of people kissing. That's a lot of My Wish by Rascal Flatts. That's a whole lot of it, But I look at it in the grand scheme of things is that you got to cut everybody a little bit of a break. Because, like I said, I've heard, yes, the song that most mother-son dances at weddings is going to be My Wish by Rascal Flatts. I've heard that song well over 100 times at weddings. But you know what? That's the first time that groom and his mother have ever danced to that song.
Right.
So if anything, it's taught me to give people a little bit of a break, give them a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
Because I film weddings almost every weekend. We have dead periods and stuff in January and stuff, but it's, like, that's somebody's biggest day of their life. I've seen it a million times, but like the things you see every day, that drive to work that you're making, it's like, especially say for the person that commutes from Clarksville to Nashville, You know, you're like, oh my gosh, this person, they're hogging the left lane. That person may have never not driven down I-24.
Right.
They don't know the rules of the road down there.
Yeah. That road is bumpy.
It's crazy. I just know whenever I'm coming back from Clarksville, I'm staying left lane all the way home.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. But it's taught me to give people grace.
Well, that's a good mindset to have for a lot of things. I mean, we can have that professionally. Tyler, as an educator, you've got to sometimes cut a kid some slack because you do know what's going on at home, and it's not conducive for the kid to behave well. If we have that mindset when it comes to our responsibility to share the gospel with people, we got to cut people some slack sometimes, because you know what? They may not know Jesus, and it's up to us to be the one to talk to them about it. I think sometimes we fall into a trap of not being aware because of social media. I just think there are pitfalls that give us a shield on that we forget aren't there when we're in the real world. And so when we are in the real world, giving people a break is sometimes a little bit easier. But
I think a lot of people seem to lose the fact, and I say this analogy quite often, but I feel like a lot of people have lost the fact that if we were to all hold our hands out right now, somebody were to come in here with a daggum razor blade, we would all bleed the same color.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day, I mean, like, I think a lot of people, they used to say, they're like, oh, we're all the same at the end of the day. The harsh reality about growing up is that we're not. We're not. We're not all the same. We're not all going, like, some people have it a lot rougher than we could ever perceive, you know? And I think that kid, you know, I mean, my mother-in-law is an educator. You're an educator as well, you know. That kid that's got a bad attitude, you don't know what he's going on. You don't know what's going on with him back at the crib. You don't. You have no idea what's going on. And I think it's just having a bigger heart. People have lost their hearts whenever it comes to the internet.
Whenever we're cutting people some slack, like I guess the church word is, we're showing them grace. And in doing that, we are being an example of Jesus. Because I mean, like, that's exactly what he did. He came to earth to live a life, and there is grace that we get from him. And so whenever we are cutting people some slack, we're showing them grace, and they are getting to see a little bit of Jesus. And I mean, that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, I think grace and empathy go a long way.
Yeah,
and then,
100%.
Cheney said it a few weeks ago. It's like we're all made in the image of God, and you know, it's what you're talking about in your podcast, and whenever you're having those conversations with people, these are people, and that person that maybe cut you off in traffic, maybe there's an emergency, like, you know, so you can't. You just, like you said, cut some people some slack.
I don't think the girl that I rear-ended 2 weeks ago, you know, she had no idea the week I've had, but, you know, she wasn't upset. Mostly because it wasn't her car, it was her mama's, but, you know, it was just one of them things that it's like, you know, I asked the girl, I was like, you having an okay day today? And she was like, yeah. I was like, well, great, I hope this didn't run. And she was like, it didn't. You know, it's like, she cut me a break.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just wish a lot more people were like that. Yeah. A lot more people would have a lot less load on their shoulders. Yeah. And life wouldn't seem so bad.
Yeah. Well, I think we forget about the times that we have been shown grace.
Oh, 100%. I think partially the reason because of that is that we've visited my parents' church, you know, for the past 2 weeks, you know, just to hang out, you know, see what they got going on. Their pastor started a new church and stuff. And he said, we've taken the word selfie a little bit too literal these days. You know, we're caught in the lens of just focused on us. Everything's about me, you know. I feel like if we were all, you wouldn't say the word ussy, would you? I wouldn't say the word ussy. Let me just take a photo of a group of people, you know. But that's probably what they would call like a gaggle of humans. It'd be an ussy. But
isn't that from Ted Lasso?
Yes. Good Lord. But dude, it's just one of those things that I feel like if we were more focused on the greater plan laid out in front of us, I feel like we would understand that our problems that we're having They're not so bad at all.
Yeah. It could be a lot worse.
All right, what's the best advice that you would give someone wanting to either start into photography or like a podcast or anything that you like, some young kid out there that's just interested?
So, dude, I had a couple of very incredible students come from Christian County High School. They come down to our studio a couple weeks ago. And one of the guys in particular, he was like, I really like to take photos of the sky, like clouds and stuff. And I was like, well, what's stopping you? He was like, dude, I don't have a camera. I was like, you got a phone? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, well, dude, there you go right there. I mean, I'm living proof of it. I mean, you know, I used to actually draw a little bit when I was a kid, and I'll never forget that. Obviously, I don't do this now, but like I would draw like I would just draw the most random things. Like I draw somebody's foot, and my grandma gave me $5 for it. Pretty sure it's because she felt bad for me. But, you know, it was like somebody will take a chance on you. It only takes one person believing in you. And most times, if you believe in yourself, that's two people believing in you.
Yeah.
You're a lot further than a lot of people who won't take a chance on themselves at all.
Right.
You know? So I think you just gotta take a chance.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people will say that the photography market is like saturated. You know, everybody thinks that they can just pick up a camera, but it's the people that stand out are the ones that really have what makes them special. You know, you know in class the students that you're like, oh, they've got it. You know, or like those athletes that they're like, oh, they're gonna play pro one day. You know, you know it, you see it. I mean, if you're really after it, it will show. If you care about your work, more importantly, it will show. And I feel like the most important takeaway really is if you enjoy what you do, truly, everybody else will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to let go of the outcome some and a lot of the fear of rejection of putting yourself out there. The worst thing, like whenever you're reaching out for people to podcast, worst thing to say is no, and then you find somebody else.
I have
like
had people
you
say
could
no.
have told us no. Yeah.
I've had people that I have looked up to in the wedding community that just said not at the moment. They didn't say no. They just, I feel like a lot of times we get in the fear of rejection is like the whole like not right now means never.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You know, I've airballed to so many people. Dude, the guy that lives in Harlan, Kentucky, that he's on TikTok is like ranking more random flavors. You ever seen that guy?
Yes.
I reached out to him. He ain't opened it up yet.
We've had a few people reach out about just starting a podcast, and we're like, just do it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's what we did. We plugged our phone in.
We talked about it for a while, and then we were just like, all right, we just got to.
I think the most important thing is a lot of people, they act like you got to have all this stuff to do it. Rest assured, Hunter Ezell had an iPhone 6. They just announced the 17 today. I think they were on the X whenever I got mine. You know, it wasn't even the best. It was, you just got to start. Yep. You know, I had a T-shirt. I talk about it a couple episodes ago on my podcast. But there was a brand called Start, TH Heart. You know,
okay.
And they had this slogan on the front of their T-shirt, and I was like, man, I could get this tattooed on me, but they would probably like come at me for like copyright or something. But the saying was, do something and let it consume you. If you were absolutely all in on what you do, bro, you'll go to the moon.
When the something that we're doing honors God, or it is simply our life as Christians, talk about making a difference in the world.
Bro, whenever that's something you are doing is for the greater good of furthering the kingdom, you have like, it's like you've got one of those nitro mushrooms in Mario Kart. You know, you're soaring past. No, you got the star in Mario Kart, and you're just flying past.
Yeah.
You'll go further than anybody or you thought could go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another thing you just talked about was the fear of rejection. I think causes a lot of people to stop, and this is something that relates to our spiritual life as well. For some reason, we're afraid of coming to God because he is going to reject us.
Mm-hmm.
That is not possible. God will not ever reject you. And so if you're afraid of starting a relationship with God, don't be. I don't want to say it's an irrational fear, but it's a fear that a lot of people have because they're afraid they're going to mess it up somehow, or God's going to look at what I did and not be okay with it. He has forgiven, or can forgive, anybody and everybody, and he will. You just have to go ahead and start. And then as you become a Christian and you grow in that, there are going to be things that you ask for and you hope for, and they aren't going to happen. And they may never happen, but sometimes the saying is just not yet, where you're asking for something from God and you are not ready for it, or there are just things that aren't set in motion yet that God's planning on. And it goes back to that passage from Proverbs: in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. When we rely on God and we trust his plan for us, we are going to go where we're supposed to go. It may not be where we thought we were going to go, but we're going to be where we're supposed to be.
All right, so as we connect this back to Alter Your Algorithm, Jackson, you want to take that first one?
Yeah, so we want to give you guys some ideas about how this connects back to Alter Your Algorithm, about how we can focus more on Jesus in our everyday lives. The first thing you got to do is find your lens. Ask yourself, how can I use my talents to serve others? Hunter uses his talent to film and post podcasts and videos, sometimes that are funny, but sometimes that are heartfelt, sometimes that they make you think. There is something that you can do, and it can be something creative, but it can be something as simple as, you know what, I've got a car, somebody needs a ride, let me help them get to where they're going. There is a talent that you have that you can use to serve. Your calling may look different than what you first imagined. Like we were talking about earlier, there are things that happen in our lives that just don't happen the way we originally thought they would.
Right.
And that is okay. That is okay.
Yeah, God works in the chaos, the messy. I think about different seasons of life, and you think about sports. You want a little conflict. That's how you prepare for when the championships or the big games are on the line. And God works the same way. There's going to be a struggle, but it's to build us up so that we're ready for any tests that come later.
Yeah. Stories shape faith. Whether it's through filming, whether it's through weddings or podcasts, storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to share your faith. My favorite thing about the Gospels, besides the fact that it's through that we learn about Jesus and his redeeming grace, are the stories, are the parables. And we get to look back on them, and there's a lesson in them. When I was a little kid, my great-grandfather used to tell stories, and I can remember them, and there was always a moral, and they impacted me. The story of your life about your relationship with Jesus, we call that a testimony. Your testimony matters, and it needs to be shared. And you can do that you can share your testimony with anybody. It could be with your coworkers, and it could be with your kids. Don't be afraid to share it. Your story might be the story that someone needs.
Have faith behind the camera. What happens behind the scenes matters just as much as what people see. Integrity when nobody's watching shapes influence when everybody is. God doesn't just bless the product, he blesses the process.
Absolutely. Integrity when nobody's watching sometimes that's a difficult thing to have sometimes. But when I talk to you, Hunter, I feel like you are the person behind the camera. Like you're real. You're real. And I value that. And it's one of the reasons I think people find your podcast entertaining, because when they actually do talk to you in real life, they realize, oh, he's just being himself.
Yeah.
We need to be ourselves, because that's who God sees. And that's who the people who are looking to us as Christians also need to see. And hopefully we have integrity so that what they are seeing is what honors God. We'd like to leave some practical takeaways and applications as we get closer to the end of this episode. The first one is embrace the chaos. Stop waiting for life to be perfect before you move. God thrives in the messy middle. If we waited on what God wanted for us, or if we waited for it to be perfect, it would never be perfect. Go ahead and go.
Yeah, we've talked about that in multiple episodes.
Yeah.
It's just, just let go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell your story. Don't underestimate the power of sharing your journey with someone else. I'm very open with one of the biggest stories in my life is, if you ask me, I'll talk about it. My older sister, she passed away when I was 14. She died tragically and stuff like that. And, I think me sharing that, I had a guy a couple of weeks ago. He said, I don't know if you remember me, but you sharing your story about your sister passing away saved my life. And it's, it was something that, I really just, the things that we don't think about are the things that, the things that we don't think about ourselves, that we try to put in the back of our head, and we try to get away from that. That could save somebody's life.
Right. We talked about that on David's episode.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was on the I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but it was like one of those things. Like, it's, you don't know who's going to listen to this podcast. You don't know who's going to listen to, who it's going to get shared with, and that's what's valuable, is somebody's story and somebody's struggle, and or somebody trying to find their platform. It's out there.
Yeah. Well. And it's something that Jesus did. I'm thinking of John chapter 3, where this guy named Nicodemus comes up to Jesus and he's asking some tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicodemus is not following what Jesus is saying, and so he's asking even more tough questions. And that's where we get the famous John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. And then we don't hear about Nicodemus until the very end of John. And when Jesus is crucified, there are a few people that help cover the cost of the burial. And one of them is Nicodemus. So it would make sense to say that conversation that Jesus had with Nicodemus, however many years later, if it was 2 or 3 years later that he was crucified, was worth having that conversation. Telling your story is so important. Clarifying things, it's just so important. And the only way that we're going to get to do that is to build relationships with people. And part of that's just storytelling.
Yeah. The third one we have here is pursue excellence, not perfection. Perfectionism glorifies self. We're not going to be perfect. Jesus was perfect. We've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Brad brought that up. Why are we even striving that? But you mentioned going all in and being, strive for excellence, but not perfection.
Yeah, it's something that we can all do our best to be excellent, and we can do our best to be perfect, but it's just impossible. The last practical takeaway we'd like to give you is guard the backstage. Who you are off camera, off mic, or off stage will determine the impact of your on stage moments. You have to have integrity as a Christian. It's important. It's something that helps you build trust with people. Ultimately, it's something that God sees, and when he sees it and he knows that you are a person of integrity, you don't have to worry. And it's a good feeling not having to worry. So guard the backstage.
So, Hunter, we have a final question, and I'll let you kind of close this out. We've talked about TikTok feeds and things like that, and we talk about social media a lot. What's one thing that you want to show up on your spiritual algorithm daily that, people see daily?
I would hope that I would just continue to be as real as I make myself out to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm very transparent with everybody. You ask me, I'll tell it, kind of stuff. But, I think I would hope that I would like for people to see that, like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle every day. I think everybody struggles. I struggle with, like, self-ridicule. I struggle with just my day-to-day and wondering, if am I going to get this person on podcast? Am I going to do this, that, and the other? But in God's eyes, everything that I can always just do my best. My yes is enough.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would think, just what little bit we've talked today, I see somebody who's real. And, I think that shows up. That showed up today. And we appreciate you being on.
Absolutely, man.
We've enjoyed it. And like I said, appreciate you being on. Is there anything that you'd like to kind of close out with the episode? Any words of encouragement or final thoughts?
Man, be kind to one another. Just I say it every episode at the end of our podcast, but it's like, live every day like it's your last, love one another. You don't know when you're going to see that person again. Just give people a break.
Yeah.
I think, realize that we're all human at the end of the day. I feel like you just got to, I think the big word for this podcast could just be grace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Grace, say grace, Christmas Vacation.
The blessing.
The blessing.
Well, we're so glad that you've been on the podcast with us today. I'm going to give us some closing thoughts. God doesn't just call preachers or missionaries. He calls everybody. He calls the people who are creative. He calls the people who are leaders and teachers and storytellers. He calls the followers. He actually says, follow me. That's ultimately who he's calling. He's calling followers. Your gift has a mission.
Yeah.
So
I would say be you.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's kind of the theme of this episode.
Be
too.
real.
Yeah, be real, be you. Like I said, it's been. I'm looking forward to running this one back on Monday.
Absolutely.
I won't. It's going to take me a few trips back and forth to Millbrook to listen.
Yeah, this is a longer episode. But I'm going to close with a prayer, and then the episode will be yours. Let's bow. God, we're so grateful for today. We're grateful for Hunter and the influence that he has in this community to be such a young person who is glorifying you and what he does. We're thankful for that. We're thankful that there are young people that can look up to him and see the goodness that he is trying to put out into the world. I'm just appreciative of that. Father, I'm thankful for grace. I'm thankful for what it means to us as Christians, what we get because of it, which is a home in heaven with you. And I'm so grateful for that. God, I ask that you be with everyone who's listening and just help them to be kind or to show kindness to somebody that may be a little bit hard to do. We're thankful for Jesus, his example. Help us to live like him. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Alter Your Algorithm. We hope you found inspiration for your journey today. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to connect, reach out to us at alterpod@gmail.com, or you can search for us on Facebook at Alter Your Algorithm. Remember, alter is spelled ALTAR. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep altering your algorithm.